Firstly, I'd like to say thank you for the invitation to speak. This is an area that I'm really passionate about, and I hope I can share a bit of that passion with you over the next 15 or 20 minutes. Can I also say on behalf of Muresk Institute to Perth region, thank you very much for the opportunity to host an event. It's a real privilege for us to share the facilities with you. Can I please have the pointer? So today I wanted to talk a little bit about my journey and some of my experiences that have helped shape my thinking. I wanted to talk about what we're doing at Muresk and go through why and what we're changing here at the farm. We'll talk specifically about the 40 hectare site that we're doing things a little bit differently on, and I'll finish up by giving our business development team a bit of a plug with some courses that we're running in this space over the next 12 months. And then finally I wanted to talk about some really exciting news of a partnership we've got with Mulloon Institute from the ACT. So a bit about my story. This looks like my 2-year-old, but it's actually me. I grew up in Western Victoria. It's in a small rural township called Winchelsea. My mum and dad ran a truck business, and as kids we were always in the trucks on and around farms. And I guess this is where an interest in farming was sparked at a pretty early age. By the time I was mid-teenage years, I was adamant that I knew what I wanted to be, and I wanted to be a farmer. As Glenn said in the intro, I did a degree in agriculture at Melbourne University. I worked on a farm, worked in agribusiness, and then relocated to Queensland where I did a research masters in animal science. But the fire burning in my belly to be a farmer was still burning pretty brightly, and it still is. And when I relocated to Western Australia, I got that opportunity. I was very fortunate to be given the opportunity by the University of Western Australia, where I was their farm manager of the research farm at Pingelly, Ridgefield Farm. And this was a fabulous opportunity. I loved every minute of it, and I learnt so much. I came into farming with a pretty open mind, and after farming for a couple of years, getting a bit of experience, as an industry I was starting to question a few of the practices that we were undertaking. And specifically around what the practices were, what effect were they having on the environment, and more specifically, what effect were they having on our soil health. My thinking was perhaps sped up in some ways because my wife was also on a bit of a journey, and she was learning about human health and specifically around gut health. And we found we had quite a bit of common ground when it came to soils. And this opened up a whole new world to us. We read a lot of books, we listened to podcasts, and we connected with a lot of people who had knowledge in this space. And it actually led us on a trip to the United States. It was a holiday, but we did visit a couple of farms along the way. And each of the farms that we did visit had a particular focus on regenerating soil health. And I think it's important to note that a number of these farms where they started actually started from a pretty degraded state. The first place we went to was White Oak Pastures, owned by Will Harris in Georgia. We then went to the very famous farm owned by Joel Salatin at Polyface Farms in Virginia. Unconventionally, we visited a rooftop farm in New York City, in Brooklyn, with the Manhattan skyline in the background, and funnily enough, their core values and their principles were exactly the same as the 2 previous farms. And then finally we went to Stone Barns at Tarrytown in New York State. So coming away from this trip, it was fair to say I was pretty inspired. I was inspired to understand that there were some different practices out there that were aiming at regenerating soil health, and I thought, could we take some of these principles away and adopt them in our system over here in Western Australia? I realised that I needed to learn, I needed to educate myself. So I did a holistic management course in Victoria, and then most notably and most significantly, I did a Grazing for Profit course with Terry McCosker in 2018. And this was probably the turning point for me. I was starting to develop a little bit of knowledge. I'd seen it firsthand in a small capacity that things could be a little bit different. And it was starting to align with my values, but I wasn't ready to put it into action just yet. So after my 5-year tenure at UWA, I decided to make a change. I moved down the road here to Muresk, and for those that are unfamiliar with Muresk, we run an 898 hectare farm. And this place is oozing with history, full of history. We're coming up to celebrate our 100-year anniversary in a couple of years. We run a cropping enterprise, a sheep enterprise, a cattle enterprise, and we've also got a house piggery on site. We're very much a conventional farm. We're owned by the Department of Training and Workforce Development. And at the very heart, our core business is around training and education, and that's where the farm fits. The farm complements that core business of training and education. But something we've been working on over the last couple of years is about on-farm demonstration and research and development. So we started to ask ourselves the question, well, why change, and if so, what needs to change? And I'd been at Muresk a couple of years by this point, and we were starting to get a pretty good understanding about some of the challenges and constraints in some areas in our farming system. I was very much of the view, though, that I didn't want to upset the apple cart too much. I was just going to continue on with the status quo and perhaps adopt these different principles on my own farm at some point in the future. But I thought long and hard about this, about three key people at three different times in this journey that had said things to me that helped influence me to make some change. And the first was Terry McCosker when I did Grazing for Profit, and he said, to know and to not do is to not know. And this one really irked me because it was me to a T, because I had this newfound knowledge but I actually wasn't putting it into action. The second one was David McLean, also from RCS. And David was here delivering some training, and I was having a good conversation about his family farm in Western Queensland, 10,000 acre cattle farm. And I said, David, why do you do what you do with RCS when you could be home on your family farm? And he said, if I was to go home, I would have the ability to influence 10,000 acres. But by doing what I do with RCS, I have the ability to influence millions of acres. And I thought that was a pretty powerful statement, particularly for who we are here at Muresk, because we're potentially in a position of influence, but not if we do what has always been done. We need to be challenging the status quo and doing things a bit differently, and that is where the opportunity lies. And the final one is Rob Harper, and I just see Rob come into the room only recently. And Rob is a former Mureskian and a highly regarded practitioner of holistic management, and just happens to be the father of one of our current students. And we're sitting on my front veranda having a cup of tea talking about this, and Rob said to me, to some effect, he said, start somewhere and start small. It doesn't have to be on the entire farm. So when is the time to make some change? If not now, then when? And this is a magnet that sits on my fridge that I look at every single day. As I mentioned, we're starting to build up a little bit of knowledge in a couple of years of managing Muresk, some of the constraints and challenges that we're finding on some of the farm. Our plants just weren't responding the way that we thought they should with the beautiful soil types we've got here through the Avon Valley, the inputs and the rainfall we're getting. When we dug down, we started to see a little bit of this. Our plant roots were going down and growing laterally. When we tested this, it confirmed that we had some pretty significant compaction. When we did predictor bee testings across the entire farm, the results gave us the feedback that we were fighting quite a bit of disease, most notably Rhizoctonia and high levels of nematodes. Our soil testing was telling us repeatedly that our pH levels in calcium chloride were somewhere between 4.5 to 5. And our organic carbon was typically between 0.5% and 1%, 1.1, 1.2 at the very best. So we're starting to get some feedback in our system that we perhaps should be trialling something a little bit different in places. We had this 40 hectare site that we'd allocated at the beginning of the year to go into a grazing cereal for livestock feed. And we thought this is our opportunity to make some change. What have we got to lose? So we did some ringing around and organised some different product that was a little more biologically friendly. And with the words of, I've only recently read the Nicole Masters book, For the Love of Soil, and she talked about one of the principles: if you have been relying on the synthetic inputs, you need to earn the right to stop using them. So with that in mind, we applied some super potash in front of the seeder, and we used a carbon C33 pellet from Carbon Ag Solutions as our upfront seeding fertiliser at 30 kilograms per hectare. At the 3 to 4 leaf growth stage, we applied a foliar application of Nutrisoil at 5 litres to the hectare. Now, for those of you that are unaware, Nutrisoil is a vermicast product. It's worm juice. So we put this crop in relatively cheaply. Our crop checks became pretty frequent down here. We drove over most of the crop checking it every other day. But we took the spade first and we started to see a little bit of this. We started to see the soil sticking to the roots. We also noted that the early establishment, the early vigour of the crop was outstanding for what we thought was not a lot of inputs. And the overall health of the plants was outstanding. We bought a refractometer opportunistically at a brewery supplies place down in Midland on the way home from the meeting, and we started, without any scientific figure, to be honest, outside of driving around the paddock in the ute, started doing some testing, started doing some Brix level testing. Now, Brix is essentially a measurement of the sugar content of the plant, and indirectly we can use it to see how healthy our plant and therefore how healthy our soil is. And when we tested our 40 hectare site, we started to see readings like this, a bit of a blurry line, a bit of a different colour, and upon some further reading, and I'm sure there's some soil scientists in the room that can straighten me up here, but the blurry line starts to indicate that it's mineral dense, the quality of the proteins is really high. And we started to see bricks readings of around 10, 9, 11. And then we jumped over next door into a conventional crop. Again, no scientific rigour here, but we jumped over next door and we saw a really clear, different line, but our bricks readings were around 5 or 6. So make of that what you will. We grazed the site from mid-July through until mid-September. We did try and contain, rather poorly I might add, with our sheep, our ewes and lambs with an electric polywire. We did this pretty poorly, and this in itself presents a really big opportunity for us to improve this site. But we estimated we produced about 7,000 kilos of lamb and 450 kilos of wool in this grazing period. So I've only just read the book, and I said down here on the front, the Gabe Brown book, Dirt to Soil, and Gabe talks about one of the key principles in soil regeneration is keeping growing roots in the soil at every given opportunity, even outside of your growing season. So with that in mind, around August, we're having a pretty tight rainfall year, and I thought if it doesn't rain in September and October, the season cuts out. I know what will happen. What are the odds that as soon as we start harvesting it will start raining? So I went down to Narrogin, I spoke to Ross Major, and we organised some seed, a summer seed mix, and I bought the seed and brought it back to the farm, ready for an opportunity. And lo and behold, what happens? As soon as we start harvesting, it starts raining. I was actually pretty happy about it in many ways. I thought this opens up some opportunities for us. So by about mid-November, the 14th of November, we decided to pull the trigger. And we allocated a 10 hectare site within our original 40 hectares, and we put a summer crop in. Another one of those key principles that Gabe Brown talks about is diversity, and we didn't have any diversity in that winter mix. So we selected an 8 seed mix for our summer crop at this rate. The day of seeding, we virtually saw our soil moisture and our top profile double on this early November rain, and our soil temperature was around 20 degrees, so we knew we'd get a pretty good germination. And the crop germinated within 5 days, and this is a picture of what it is looking like at the start of last week. I think I took this picture. One of the important considerations that we had here is that we didn't want to expose ourselves to an erosion risk. So we selected a site that had quite a bit of plant material that was going to give us a little bit of cover and some protection for the soil, hold it in place. So yesterday when I was putting the final touches on the presentation, I wanted something a little bit definitive that I could bring together at this early stage, and I didn't quite have it outside of our observations. Are we having an effect? And I got a phone call about 4:10 yesterday from one of our research colleagues at Curtin University, and they've had postgraduate students up here over the past couple of weeks collecting data on soil respiration. Now, soil respiration is a measurement of the release of carbon dioxide from the soil, and we can use that indirectly as a measurement of soil microbial activity. And what I was pleased to hear, and I then got an email with this graph, is that we found a statistically significant difference at this very early and very preliminary stage of higher biological activity in our soil of our biological paddock compared to our conventional paddock of our oats. So I was pretty encouraged to hear this at the very early stage, that perhaps and maybe we are having an impact in this short period of time on the livestock under our feet. So I was pretty pleased to hear this. I also received some soil test results back yesterday from some samples that we took on the 20th of November. A few things of note, and I'm happy to get some feedback on this from Lynn and Tim and co, but nothing of too much note. The bottom row here is of the samples that we took in 2019. The row here at the top is the samples that we took this year in November the 20th. We noticed that our organic carbon had gone down slightly. Might have been a side effect, but the thing of note is that we got the plant available nitrogen had actually increased threefold, and this site hasn't received any nitrogen fertiliser, not one unit this year. So I'd be happy to hear some feedback from some experts around this, but too good not to share. So where to here for the paddock to start with? We plan to continue on this journey, and we plan to measure, see if we're having an actual impact. Where to here for the farm? We plan to improve our grazing management. We know we can have an impact with our grazing management, but ironically something that I'm really passionate about but probably do the most poorly. We are going to adopt more of this biological input into more of our cropping program, and we're going to increase the livestock in our crop grazing, one of those key principles. One thing I haven't had time to talk about is our perennial shrub system, and those of you on the bus tour this morning saw a little bit of it down the front here. But we've identified areas that haven't been overly productive for us in the past and have some form of degradation. We planted 13,000 perennial forage shrubs this year, and we plan to do something similar again next year. We hope with a change of management we can rehabilitate and regenerate the site. Next week we plan to do some electromagnetic and gamma radiometric surveys in collaboration with Curtin University. This will give us a foundation and a structured approach for a more targeted approach with some soil carbon and soil health projects that Curtin want to do on the farm. And I'll just say here that we'd love to hear from anyone in industry, from department, from private industry, from universities, that would like to do some work on the farm in this space, even on the coattails of what we're already doing and the changes we're starting to implement. And finally, I'll just give a quick plug to our business development team who have been working hard in this space. We've got Brian Waldorf from Inside Outside Management delivering a holistic management course starting in January. Very excitingly, a certificate in regenerative agriculture delivered by Nicole Masters at some point. She was supposed to be here in July this year, but the COVID situation put a halt to that. And that's coordinated by Nutrisoil and Shay at Perth Regen. We've got some workshops on landscape rehydration. This is delivered by Stuart Andrews, the son of Peter from Tarwin Park Training. And we've also got RCS, the Resource Consulting Services from Queensland, coming back to deliver a soils workshop and a grazing workshop in March. And finally, I want to finish on this. I heard the Minister talk about some work at Brotto Breeze Place earlier, and this is in line with that. Mulloon Institute, for those of you that are unfamiliar, is a non-for-profit organisation in the ACT, and they practice landscape rehydration and regenerative agricultural principles. And we've been working hard over the last 12 months to form a partnership and a collaboration with these guys, and they applied for a WA Community Stewardship Grant with Muresk nominated as one of the key sites to undertake the on-farm work. And we found out on Wednesday just gone that Mulloon had been successful in applying for this grant, and work will commence at Muresk in late 21 or 2022. So most significantly, the development of some WA training packages to come out of this is what will be really exciting for us at Muresk. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much again for the opportunity, and thanks for allowing us to share our story.